think it's time to start our study session. I'll call us to order. And Summer, if you'll call the roll.
Commissioner Patterson?
Here.
Commissioner Norwood?
Present.
Commissioner Siragusa?
Here.
Commissioner Roberts?
Here.
Commissioner Stallings?
Here.
Commissioner Orr?
Here.
And Mayor Mason.
Here. Item number 2, at the Commissioner's request, discuss any item of concern on the regular session agenda. Quiet, okay. Item number 3, 3.1, Mike Cooper had to go back for his wife had a doctor's appointment, so he is not going to be here for that. So we're going to pass that. I'll go to 3.2, update the Stride Bank Center on the new scoreboards and digital signage. And Jeff, I think that's you.
Good evening, folks. How y'all doing today? Just going to give you a quick update on where we stand with the money and everything for our new marquees and scoreboards. We're in the process of that money being transferred to us, and then we'll work with Aaron to get that taken care of and get this system purchased.
And just remind everybody that was the money from the contract?
Yeah, that's correct. It's money that was guaranteed from the renewal of the contract, $250,000. So we're going to take advantage of a revenue generating project of both interior scoreboards and an exterior marquee that we haven't had for a while. So just a little update on where the marquee is going to go, and I know you guys are going to vote on this in a little while, but it's going to go on, the proposal is the northwest corner of Grand and O&K Garriott there, and it'll be facing, of course, east and west. If you see the one that's out at Family Pharmacy further out on Garriott, that is going to be the same type of board, maybe just a little bit bigger. It's going to specifically, the overall size of the board is 6 foot 4 feet high, 12 and a quarter feet wide by 8 feet or by 80 inches deep, and it'll set up approximately 16 feet on top of a 10-foot pole there in that corner. Viewing size is 6 by 12, so it's a pretty good size board. So we should be able to see things real well. Electricals, 120 volts, 80 amps, and then it'll play video, it'll play animated text and graphics. It's the same type of system, it's Watchfire, it's the same type of system that is at the David Allen Baseball Park. So it's real good. Aaron and I took the time to spend with Peggy over there, and a great system, real easy to use, real super friendly on the user, so we should be able to do a great job with it. As far as what it's going to do for us, it's going to help us advertise upcoming events at our building, for you guys, for the city of Enid, and any of our partners. We'll work with them. Anything they want to put up there, we'll do that. And of course, it's revenue generating, so we'll sell some ad space as well. It's, like I say, real easy to use, and we have working with Klein Signs to get this system, and it'll be great, talking to those guys, great support. So we shouldn't have too many problems with it, hopefully. And that's it from me. Pretty simple stuff. It's a great system. I hope to have a rendering to show you a little bit more, but Watchfire wasn't able to get that to me to show me what it looked like. But it's going to look good. Like I say, if you really want to take a deeper look, Family Pharmacy out further east.
On the agenda, there's some pictures, I think.
On the agenda?
Yeah, did you just show pictures too? Or?
I did just the one. The corner there. That's all I had.
Oh.
There's
Ken, on the
also
agenda, I think there's some pictures under,
Location.
yeah. If you could pull those up, I think it'd be good to show everybody. It's back, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. So it's going to look real nice out there on that corner. So we're excited to have it. We're excited to finally be able to do some advertising out on the street front and help folks know that we've got things going on.
Now, originally, you'll remember we had, you guys may remember we had the original digital sign that
Yes,
was
sir.
down there was
On Park?
Park and Grand.
Park and Grand, yeah.
And it just, it was there from the beginning in about 2012 or so. It didn't seem to hold up real well, but I think the problem was parts availability. You'll remember at the end,
Yeah,
half of
it's-
it didn't work. And so we've torn it down now,
Yes, sir.
but this is a better location. And
It's a better system. Watchfire is going to be around a lot longer. The system that we had it ran its time. In the company, we still use one of their systems in the building, but we're also, part of this deal is replacing the 2 scoreboards in the building, the north and south ends, with the Watchfire gear as well. So we'll have one server that drives both the interior system and the exterior system. So we'll help with those games that come in the building and any advertising inside as well.
That's what I was going to ask. We'll be able to sell signage or ads on the
Yes, sir.
scoreboards in the inside?
We will do that as well. Yes, sir. It'll add to our inventory, for sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
How long will it take to get this thing up and running?
Well, once we get this approved, I think the last I heard it's 6 to 8 weeks lead time. As soon as we get it in, we'll be pushing them to get it in as quick as they can. And I'm hoping 6, 8 weeks, that puts us out
Fall, probably.
August, September, October at the latest. So, yes, sir. Hopefully parts will, hopefully things are getting better on supply chain. So we'll get it here faster.
So I think it's on the agenda too. Scott, you want to talk about why it's on the agenda?
You bet. The size of this is actually the maximum allowed electronic messaging center in our ordinance. There's nothing wrong with the size. It's really just the location of where it is, since the Stride Bank Center doesn't have frontage necessarily on Garriott. We don't allow what we call an off-premise sign. And so we can approve them through an economic development measure if voted on by this board. And so that's the channel that we're trying to go. We realize this is a need. It fits the space. The city owns all but one of those properties in between Garriott and Stride Bank Center. And so it's a good fit for it. But we're just trying to navigate our ordinance the proper way. And so we're bringing it to you through this economic development channel so that it can be approved.
Carol? Legal question. Since we own the Stride Bank Center, we have management working the Stride Bank Center for us, and we own the property where the sign's going. There, I know we were talking about the economic and everything else. I don't think that fell into our sign issue. I think we as a city are allowed to put up a sign on our own property.
Okay, except that the property that we're going to put it on isn't the Stride Center property.
But it's city property, which
Yes,
Stride Bank
but-
Center's on
but-
city property too.
But, yes, but off-premise means if you have signage for your building, and then you can't, it's like a billboard. It is off-premise under the analysis of sign stuff.
Well, I figured since we own the whole city block all the way up to the Glow, and to including the Glow, I think as one premises, since we own everything there, it's pretty,
Well, then you should have no problem voting for the economic development deal. But the thing is that it would, if we use that, it would open the door to, if that was the case, then you could have someone buy a tiny little piece of property and then it could be abused, and that's not generally the way sign people think about things.
I could be very conservative in my approach, but I want to be above board and go through all the.
and I
Okay.
appreciate that, Scott. I was
Yes.
just kind of saying that we own all of that property and everything else, so.
One of the criticisms that we get, commissioners, that we don't follow our own rules.
Exactly.
So this is a way that we can follow our own rules. I thought much like you do. However, other people think differently. So we have, and this commission has exercised that economic development. In fact, I remember moving a billboard and some other things. So we thought this was the route to go, but we certainly follow your lead on what you want to do. But what we really want to do is make more money and reduce the subsidy, right, Jeff?
Right, that's correct.
And this sign, I think, will help.
Sponsorships.
The last time we used the same thing was, there was a really nice sign downtown for the Dillingham
I remember,
agency. We used the same technique to do that.
So if we get any requests from other private business owners, that want to do this too? Are we going to let them do it, or are we setting a precedence that we may not be able to defend if somebody else wants to, some other business downtown wants to put
We've
in?
had numerous
Piece of private
other
property.
businesses.
I'm sorry?
We've had numerous other businesses, that's what it's there for. If they can show a real economic development need, then we have done it in the past, quite often.
And so it could be considered, yes, and it has been considered before.
Yes.
The billboard that was in front of was somewhere on Garriott. This exception was used to move it in front of Primetime Sports Grill to support business.
And I think one of the signs was the Academy, this was before I came back.
I
but
think either the Academy or one of the
sign-
Jiffy Trip signs or
Yeah,
something
yes.
will use this exception. So it hasn't been used a lot, I don't think, that I recall, but it's been used before.
But it should be used on a case-by-case basis, and it will make sense for some, and it will not make sense for others.
So are there any rules on how much the sign has to have information about Stride Bank Center, or how much advertising they can put up? Do we have anything written on, in the code?
No, the sign is owned by, it's essentially owned by the city of Enid, ultimately. So the city of Enid will use it, the Stride Bank Center will use it for purposes that help the Stride Bank Center make more revenue and require less subsidy. So was your question, could other people use it? I guess they could if we use
Yeah,
a policy and they pay money to use it.
The big thing we're going to use it for is obviously events, and to get the word out about events. But if there's partnerships that we have, and several of our partnership agreements have the use of signage of the outdoor. When we had the old marquee, it was written into their contracts, and we took it out until we got a new one. So we'll rewrite that back into those contracts, and they will have some advertising space out there.
So like for First Fridays and stuff like
Yes,
that?
yep, we'll work
Things
with
like
our
that.
city partners and everybody that has events to help them as well, yeah.
So nothing political?
No, sir.
Okay.
Not unless I'm directed to.
No.
No.
Okay.
Nothing obscene.
No, no.
Okay, now, one of the things is, it's hard, political speech is protected. So, now, obscenity is not protected, but, and I doubt that people, but you can't prohibit political speech.
Yeah, and I think the way I'll handle that is if we get somebody that calls in wanting to post up a presidential thing or something like that, me and Mr.
Well, we
Gilmore
wouldn't
will
do
have
that
it.
anyway. I mean,
Well, but
we're not going to put "Let's Go Brandon," and we're not going to put "Make America
No,
Great
no,
Again" on
nothing
this billboard.
derogatory,
I
but
can tell you
if-
that's not going to happen.
If Mayor Mason wants to wants to campaign on there, you and I would have a conversation and say, okay, how are we going to do that? So it'll be a case by case.
Well,
That's where I'm going.
Okay, and I guess we're getting far afield, but my suggestion would be that if you want to prohibit political speech, you can.
Okay.
The city cannot.
Okay, so
So don't ask, just,
we just write a policy that says this sign is not for that.
Yes.
It's for me. I like it.
okay.
Well, and the purpose of the sign is largely to advertise for events happening at the
Correct.
Stride Bank Center.
Exactly.
Certainly other events downtown that can, that's what I envision the
Yep.
sign is for. It's not to, in my opinion, to put up there and promote other things, unless people want to pay to do that.
Right.
It's to promote our center down there to make more money that hopefully will require less subsidy to support in the
Correct.
future.
Exactly. Okay.
Officially, this is an electronic messaging center. This is not a billboard. This is a sign for you.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other comments? Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Item 3.3, update on manufactured housing proposed ordinances. I think probably this is you, isn't it, Leroy?
Yes, sir.
Leroy, let me go ahead and start while you're getting ready to go.
Yes.
This is a continuation of an effort by the city to focus on trying to figure out what can the city do to help with the needs of housing. The city is not designed nor going to be good at going out building houses and selling houses or loaning money to do this. So one of the primary ways we can affect change is by changing our regulations. Leroy's going to tell you, and you've heard before about manufactured housing. He's going to talk about the 5 proposed ordinances. He's going to talk about feedback. But as we go, we're still going to take this at the pace that obviously the commission is comfortable with. So as he goes through this, I know there's some, I have some thoughts, Leroy has some, you guys have some. We're looking for your feedback, and potentially we're looking to see, is there something we would bring back on the 6th or at a later time? And there are some things we recognize we need to do more study on. So with that, Leroy, you're going to tell us all about it.
Thanks. We presented this last night to the Planning Commission, and so we've updated this PowerPoint since last night to incorporate some of their thoughts. But again, as the city manager indicated, the purpose of this is to encourage infill development on underused or vacant lots already served by existing utilities, water, sewer, streets. But secondly, to expand suitable and economic housing opportunities. I took out the word affordable because that's kind of a variable term and went with the terminology of economic. The other one is to maintain a balance between expanding how do I say okay on low battery?
Can't check your low battery message. I
There you
think
go.
that's causing a distraction in the chambers. Go ahead, Leroy.
Thanks. We need to maintain a balance between expanding the economic housing opportunities and retaining a residential building design elements important to the appearance of traditional neighborhood. Every time you add a feature that makes it look more like a traditional neighborhood, you may be adding cost. And every time you take something away, maybe there's cost savings to the potential homeowner in the future. And what we have to try to do is strike a balance up between those two competing interests. One, to make affordable housing, but number 2, protect the appearance of our traditional neighborhoods. Tonight's presentation, we're going to talk about some of the city staff went and had a meeting with the Manufactured Housing Association of Oklahoma. We're going to touch on that. We're going to talk about the difference between manufactured homes and modular homes. We're going to go through definitions of factory-built housing. That's really not changed a whole lot since the previous presentation, so I won't go into a lot of detail on those. And then we're going to talk about a state statute that we reevaluated. There's some limitations, but there's exceptions to those limitations on what we can do. We're going to touch on that. Then we're going to talk about options of different design elements that we could incorporate on the residential manufactured homes to make them fit into traditional neighborhoods. And we're giving examples from other communities for consideration. Some perspective, we're going to show a map. We want to make sure everybody realizes, because when you just show the overlay district on a blow-up map, it looks like a big area. But when you show it on a citywide area, it kind of puts it in perspective. We're not doing the whole town. And then talk about the Webster Park area R4 residential manufactured housing overlay district, the Southern Heights R2 residential manufactured housing overlay district, and then the R4, R4A infill residential PUD unit development opportunity. Then we're going to talk about next steps relative to this plan of action around manufactured homes. And then at the end, touch about some future studies that we're looking at from community development planning standpoint. There's 5 ordinances, and I added this because it got a little confusing last night. So I wanted to clarify. There's actually 5 separate ordinances under consideration as part of this package. The first one is to update and clarify the definitions of factory-built housing. We haven't updated the definitions for a long time, and they have changed because of HUD code and different things. That's one we probably ought to take a serious look at, even if we don't do any of the others, is update our definitions. The second one is to establish the Webster Park Area Overlay District. Third one is the Southern Heights R2 Overlay District. The fourth is to create the plan unit development for the R4 and R4A, which is a simplified plan unit development process compared to our regular PUD. And the last one, in Title IX, there is a regulation in there that spells out where manufactured homes can be in our community. So if we adopt any of these ordinances, we'll have to go back and amend that one to add those areas to that regulation. I point out this is a cafeteria plan format. The ordinance are standalone documents. So if you wanted to just pursue the plan unit development, but not the 2 overlay districts or vice versa, you can adopt those ordinances individually, and they don't interact with the other ordinances. Again, updating our definitions is something we should seriously look at, and then it will be up to the governing body which plan of action we look at as far as the overlay districts or the PUD, and then again, amending the location restrictions.
Leroy,
Yes, sir.
I'm going to ask you a question.
Yes.
On the ordinance that you're proposing, Webster is R4, Southern Heights, East Park, R2. R2 is single home, right?
Correct.
R4 is multi-home where you can have a duplex.
Correct.
I know many individuals that used to live in Enid, that lived in that area. They're getting ready to start investing their money into that area. And most of them want to build duplexes, stick build from the ground up, slabs. So
In the
that
Southern
wouldn't
Heights area?
work. Yes, sir. That would not work for them.
It would not. What we would need to do is look at a rezoning and go through a similar process where we have a public hearing and notify in a newspaper with a drawing showing the area we're considering. And you could rezone it from R2 to R4 that would allow duplexes.
To do a blanket.
That would be correct. And that would be an actual rezoning rather than an overlay district.
Okay.
But it would not affect this overlay district because you could rezone. It would just change the zoning underneath, just like the Webster Park area is an R4 zoned area. Then whatever portion you rezone, the Southern Heights overlay district could be over, part of it could be over R4, part of it could be over R2.
So I need to get with my constituents and have a meeting with them.
Yes. And we would
enlighten
be
them on
glad
this.
to assist from city staff as far as any research you need it done, any maps that you need, those kind of things. And I think we identified the Webster Park area and Southern Heights, even though one of them's R2 and R4. Economics, you're not going to see, if you're going to take advantage of infill and infrastructure we have there, the economics are not going to support building a $300,000 or $400,000 single-family home in those areas. So this type of development, the manufactured homes, what you're talking about with duplexes, are the type of investments that would probably make economic sense in the areas that we're talking about.
Okay.
Commissioner Norwood, I want you to know too, there is some R4 zoning in the Southern Heights area But this particular overlay, I think when we get further, if we have the slide in there about the overlay, you can see some of the R4 areas are just not in the overlay.
Okay.
And I think we're going to need to and want to have a meeting with the folks that live in Southern Heights to talk about this R2 and whatever else. So that would be great and probably one of our next steps. But I did want you to know there is some property that's already zoned R4. I don't know if it's vacant, I don't know what's on it, I just noticed it. You can see it on the slide when we get there.
And that's what we have done on Moore and Monroe with Ben Cook, putting in the townhomes right
Yes.
off of Monroe. So, I mean,
Yes.
it'd be the same thing, just like that.
Correct. And it'd just be a separate action from this, but there is a process that we'd be glad to assist with it.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We had a meeting with the Manufacturer Housing Association of Oklahoma. We met with the executive director, and we met with a gentleman that was actually the instructor that teaches how to install manufactured homes. And it was Assistant City Manager Scott Morse, Scott Garnan, our code official, and myself. Some of the discussion topics was the terminology. As we go through this, you'll see we're using a little bit different terminology on some things tonight than the previous presentation, because we changed our terminology to match up with the industry's terminology so that we'll be talking apples and apples instead of confusing people. The other thing that we learned from them, their interpretation, a manufactured home, even if it's built to an IRC code, is still considered a manufactured home. It doesn't change the fact it's a manufactured home. The terminology I used last night was a rose is still a rose by any other name. So if you take a manufactured home and upgrade it or change it to meet the IRC code, by our definition and their definition, it would still be considered a manufactured home and not be considered the same as a stick-built or a modular home. The other thing, two surprises. One, they were very supportive of what we were doing and thought that we were making some good strides as far as addressing affordable housing and opening opportunities for manufactured homes. But as a supporter and proponent of manufactured housing, I was very pleased that they also recommended, and you'll see when we get into our models that we'll go through of building architectural features to add as requirements, they also wanted to make sure that manufactured homes that went into traditional neighborhoods had those additional features to make them fit in. Because it's good for their industry if a manufactured home is well received where they go, because then it will grow other opportunities rather than trying to force single wides or something in a neighborhood where it doesn't go. So they've got a very common sense approach to their support level, and they're working with other communities. And so they also want to see things done where a manufactured home that's put in a traditional neighborhood fits that neighborhood. And I was very pleased with that attitude and approach. Manufactured homes are on a permanent chassis. They're designated to be used as a dwelling with or without a permanent foundation, constructed to meet either the HUD code or the IRC code. Modular homes are not built on a permanent chassis. They're intended to be located only upon a permanent foundation, and they are constructed to meet the IRC International Residential Code. Modular homes can go anywhere that a site-built or stick-built home can go if they meet the same criteria and go through the building permit process. Manufactured homes cannot go all those places. Definitions that we will be updating is mobile home, manufactured home, residential manufactured home. In our earlier presentation, we called it a manufactured home enhanced. We've changed that because the terminology used by the industry, they called those residential manufactured homes. So if you remember that terminology, we changed our nomenclature to be consistent with the industry. And then modular home. Mobile homes, this definition has not changed since our previous presentation to the city council. They do not meet the HUD code. And this is a type of housing, and the stigma that the manufactured housing industry has tried to overcome for many years. And as we go through this process and look at creating opportunities for manufactured homes in our traditional neighborhoods, we will also have to overcome that stigma, because when you say manufactured homes, first thing people think of is something that looks like that. They don't look like that anymore. But as we noted before, we will not, because these would be built prior to 1974, we will not let any more mobile homes that built before 74 into our community. The ones that exist now will be treated as non-conforming structures, and as long as they're maintained, they can remain. Manufactured homes, again, we have not changed that definition from the last time we visited, other than clarify. Again, they're manufactured on a permanent chassis. They're designed to be used as a dwelling with or without a permanent foundation, and they're constructed to meet either the HUD code or the IRC code, but they're still manufactured homes. And they can come in what we traditionally call single-wide units, or they can come in what we traditionally call double-wide units. Residential manufactured home, again, this is a manufactured home that meets the definition that we just went through, but it has added features. It incorporates designated building design elements. When we first looked at the state statute, I'm going to go over in a minute, we thought we were more limited, and we only proposed 3 items: 24-foot wide, lot orientation where it faces the street, must be attached to a continuous concrete or concrete block foundation. Tonight, we will go over and look at Ardmore and some other communities and what other design elements they have proposed adding to their manufactured home to put them in traditional neighborhoods. i.e., one example that I put on this slide is even the Manufactured Home Association said you should restrict it to new manufactured homes constructed in the last 2 years. We don't want to create an opportunity for manufactured homes to go in our traditional neighborhoods, and we end up with a manufactured home that's repossessed, it's not been treated very well, that's 10 years old, going into a traditional neighborhood. That would better fit into our R3 and R6, where you can already put a manufactured home. So these are the type housing compared to the earlier picture that I showed you that we would be talking about. The state statute that we looked at and revisited, it says shall not adopt or impose new single-family residential building design elements after this state statute has been adopted. But the key word is unless. It provides an exception. And so in a plan unit development, which is one of our proposals, the R4A infill residential PUD, and then secondly, in overlay districts, which we cover our Webster Park overlay district and the Southern Heights, are exceptions. And in those areas, you can add building design elements. And so with that, thought in mind. Oklahoma City, their overlay district, again, number one is similar to ours, the 24 feet, but they also add 2, 3, and 4 on that slide. They require the exterior veneer material must be compatible with at least 50% of the existing homes on the block face, unless the number of vacant lots exceeds the number of existing homes. The roof of each home must be a gable or hip type. The roof of each home must meet a minimum of a 3 to 12 slope. When we visit with the Oklahoma Manufactured Home Association, the executive director took us on a driving windshield tour of some areas where Oklahoma City had previously approved and put manufactured home in some overlay districts. And some of those were 20 years old, and they still appear good and fit the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, some of them even look better than some of the modular homes that were put in the same neighborhood. And they were pretty proud of that fact that they had been involved in a project that they provided affordable housing that had aged well over that 20-year period and still had a good appearance. Ardmore, I pulled from the Ardmore code, and they had some additional elements. One of them that I highlighted was the unit incorporates a porch, siding, and roof materials customarily used on site-built homes within the city of Ardmore. This is a document, consideration 1 and consideration 2. These were actually drafted by the Manufacturing Housing Association themselves, and they are providing this document to communities and support these concepts. I highlighted some of them with red line. Each manufactured building on an individual lot shall be occupied only as a single-family dwelling. Roofing materials consisting of composition asphalt shingle, fiberglass shingle, wood shake, baked tile, or crushed rock. Have siding material consisting of wood, wood products, stucco, brick, horizontal lap steel, and aluminum horizontal lap vinyl or rock. One probably important one is the last one I highlighted. Have the tongue and running gear, including axles, removed, and the property owner shall declare the manufactured home as real property. If you put it on a permit foundation and you have it determined as real property, it's titled with the property going forward instead of having a chattel title. So there is property taxes that would benefit our school district, the career tax, rather than the taxes on personal property through the chattel going to the Department of Transportation. So that's an important feature to consider. In their Consideration 2 document, at the bottom I highlighted a couple that we might want to consider. Sidewalks shall be installed from the street or sidewalk adjoining neighboring lots to the front. Have exterior surface and window treatments that to the maximum extent possible is architecturally compatible with those of neighboring properties. And then that was too big to put on one slide. Be placed on the parcel according to a pre-submitted and approved plot plan. That's not a plan that's drawn by an engineer and signed off by an engineer. A plot plan is just simply a plan drawn to scale so that when we get ready to issue the building permit, we know where everything's going to be sited. So when we go out to inspect, we know what we're inspecting to, where it's going to set on the property in relation to other improvements. So they could do it themselves as long as they draw it to scale.
Leroy, can you go back to that on the sidewalk deal?
Yes.
So what you're wanting is if one of these is going into one of the lots that doesn't have a sidewalk in front of it, you just want us to put sidewalks into the adjoining properties next to it, so sidewalk to nowhere? On a single-family house, when we have done a large-scale deal down on Moore that has stores down the street, and we did away with the sidewalks for that project.
I want to clarify, these are not things that we're proposing to add tonight. We are just giving you an ideal of what other communities have done.
Okay, I just wanted to
So
clarify
your
that up
point's-
because
Your point's well taken. Between now and the public hearing on August 6th, staff will, from this list, come up with what our recommendation is. Tonight is not a recommendation. All we're doing is giving you ideals of what other communities have done.
Okay, thank you.
Would point out, again, if you look at the citywide map, again, if you just look at the blow-up map of, for example, the Webster Park area overlay district, it looks like a big area. But if you look at it in perspective to the entire community, it is not that big of area. And again, Southern Heights, when you look at that overlay district, and then the PUD infill development would only be available in the areas shaded blue and a few areas of R4A that are red on the map. And of course, the ones in the Webster Park area, those would be permitted uses. So you wouldn't have to go through any process, but go through the building permit process. In this area, it would be a use by review. So it would be subject to review by the Planning Commission. And then finally, the plan unit development, each one of those would go through a process where there's a plot plan and a survey if we can't identify the property pins to establish the property boundaries, then we would require a survey. But they would have to go through approval process through both the Planning Commission and the City Council. So they will be something that would be on a case-by-case basis where both the Planning Commission and the City Council agree they fit the neighborhood that they're being proposed in. But again, we're not talking about the entire area. Webster Park area overlay district, again, this would create a district where residential manufactured housing would be a permitted use in that area. We have the three areas we already talked about. As we indicated when we come back to hearing on August 6th, out of those things that we showed from other communities, we will probably recommend adding some of those that we think make sense. City Council may adjust those when we present them. You may think that they're too costly and try to do that balance, take some out, add some, but we will come back with definitive recommendations. Again, this is the area that we're proposing for the Webster Park overlay district on the northeast Cherry Avenue and East Birch. And then it kind of zigzags on the east side, 26th Street, 28th and 30th. And then on the south side, Randolph, Maple, and then it goes up to Oak Avenue, and then on the west side, 16th Street. The Southern Heights R2 residential manufactured housing overlay district. Again, this is a use by review. So if you wanted to put a residential manufactured home on a lot in this overlay district, it would have to go through the city council as a use by review process and be approved. And then, of course, it would come to city council if there was an appeal of that decision of the planning commission if someone had concerns.
And Leroy, that's the reason why I want to visit with you and Gerald and the staff, because that's a lot of bureaucracy. I mean, that's a lot of red tape.
Correct.
I mean, the process, we're talking about poor folks who need help. And we're here to help them. And I agree with the mayor 100%. We want quality that's going to last for generations to come. But we also need to make it to where people can get a start somewhere.
And we would be agreeable to that. One of the things that our city manager has recommended as part of this process, either before our public hearing on August 6th or after, before we adopt the Southern Heights overlay district, that we have a public hearing or town meeting in that neighborhood and get feedback. If the feedback from the neighborhood is that they want to make it where it's a permitted use and it's well supported, then we could consider it. So having participation when we have the town hall meeting in the Southern Heights area, your leadership, others, their feedback could change that, where we looked at making it a permitted use rather than a use by review. But because we started out overlaying it over an R2, which is our most restrictive zoning, that's why we went first with a use by review. That could be modified if we got the appropriate feedback from the community on what they supported.
Do we need to have this meeting set up before August the 6th?
Yes, we would like to do it before. And
Might as well have it with this commissioner as well, because we're together.
sure, but you know as well as I do, Commissioner, that some people will like this in Southern Heights, and some people won't. Some people outside of Southern Heights will like this, and some won't. So we really, I've just learned a big lesson recently in R2 about a pickleball thing that seemed simple, but it wasn't simple, because R2 is the most restrictive housing, and that's what we're doing. You know, we can think all day long we're helping people. We need to be careful. So we're all for doing that with your leadership and your leadership to have that meeting, get the feedback and incorporate it. The use by review merely means that there are some minimal requirements they would get with. It goes to MAPC, and usually that's the end of it unless a decision's made that's appealed to the commission. But the commissioners can do whatever they want on that if we just deem to change it, make it a permitted use. We're just being very cautious because we've learned from experience.
Let's educate the public.
Okay.
Let's educate the public.
And one point, if we cannot have a good town meeting with good participation before August the 6th, August 6th, we will have the public hearing on all this and get the public hearing out of the way. If we're ready to move forward with the infill PUD and the Webster one, but we're not quite ready to move with the Southern Heights, we can always have that town hall meeting after August 6th, public hearings out of the way, then we can come back to a later council meeting and adopt the Southern Heights overlay district with the modifications supported by the neighborhood. Preferably, we'd like to do it before August 6th, but if we need to do it afterwards, we still could. I think having a well-participated meeting so we get good input is almost as important as the date we do it.
I understand, that we're talking about having a public hearing and everything else, and you're gonna bring us. Can we at least get some copies of the proposals beforehand? Because this is I'm watching all of this stuff for the first time now.
Yes, we
And I
will.
believe the MAPC didn't have anything last
No,
night.
Commissioner, that's not correct. The agenda was posted, all the stuff was on there, and respectfully, we have talked about it before, so we can print anything off the agenda.
Well, that's what I'm saying. This presentation I was not offered before tonight.
This one, you're correct. The first presentation we
Yeah.
made to city council, you got it early.
Yes.
Okay.
Modifications.
This one was put on at the last minute because we were planning on bringing this as a full document to you for August 6th, which you would have gotten prior to that. What we thought that with the updates from our visit with the Manufactured Home Association and our visit with the Planning Commission last night, because there was space on tonight's study session, that it would be worthwhile to update you on things that we modified as a result of those two meetings. When we complete the documents for the August 6th hearing, yes, you will get those in advance, just like the prior
Well,
president.
it wasn't the intent. We
Well, I know.
dropped the ball on not
That's all-
getting it out to
that's
you.
all
So
I-
we typically do
that's
that,
all I
and something
requested.
happened this time.
And I spent this morning updating this presentation based on input we got last night.
And we noticed the modifications because me and Commissioner Saragusa, we discuss these things and talk heavily about these things when we're not even present here in our own private time, because it's very important to us that we take care of our constituents.
Yeah, and I think probably the only, it's not a good excuse that we have is originally we weren't going to talk about it at this study session, so we'll
Okay.
make sure we
But
we'll follow
I'm
up.
just saying, it's hard for me to keep up with
Yes.
something that's being thrown at me
Yes,
that I haven't had time to research.
absolutely,
And
but
that's why I said we're talking about August 6th on having a hearing. And just hear me out for this one. We're talking about having a hearing on August 6th. I want the material before that time so that I am prepared on August 6th to have my best input in on it.
And I fully understand that, and hopefully you understand
And then
how
I'll have-
this happened tonight.
Yes, and I'm not questioning that. I'm asking for August 6th.
Yes.
I don't want to be
Yes, sir.
blindsided by something on
Yes,
August
sir.
6th.
We will get it out as early as we can.
And what caught my attention from the very beginning was from affordable housing and the wording been changed to economical.
that was some liberty that Leroy took that I understand, because we can call it whatever you guys want to call it. We are just diligently trying to work through it. We called it that because if I asked you, what does affordable housing mean to you, you'll tell me one thing. If I ask Leroy, if I ask Carol, if I ask Commissioner Stallings, so economical, we'll change it back. So really, the crux of everything is the same thing you've seen, but the exact changes, right. So
Yeah.
our
And we understand the work that you're doing, Leroy, and we appreciate the work that you're
Yes.
doing, because myself and Commissioner
and-
Norwood asked you to go to the.
And your
those
point's well
commissions that you did.
taken, and I would point out, using the term economical, that language come from the Manufactured Home Association, is why I changed from affordable, because they realize in today's world, using the term affordable may be misleading, because affordable can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So that change come from our visit with the Manufactured Home Association. That's terminology we use.
And what reason why I brought that out, because when we're dealing with HUD and funding coming from federal government, we want to be in line with their terminology as well.
Correct.
Not the manufacturers. With HUD, we met with them this year in DC while we were there. You're doing an awesome job. I want to tell you that. It's no attack on you. We just
Sure.
want to be on point. So when you say affordable, I'm going to tell you what I think affordable housing is. 215,000 and down. 215 and down. That's affordable in the United States, even in this area. In Arkansas, Colorado, Missouri, Kansas, Texas, and Oklahoma, not in California, not in New York, not in Florida, but in this region, that's affordable. 215K and down is affordable. I research it, I read this stuff, I study this stuff.
Okay.
Because it's important. But like I said, it's no attack on anyone here. You guys are doing a great job. But we have to be able to answer the hard questions to our constituents. They voted us in to be responsible.
And I would also point out that we will be refining with specific proposals on the building features that would be acceptable to make it a residential manufacturer to be placed, manufactured home to be placed in a traditional neighborhood. You all have the freedom to, as individual council members, communicate with our city manager based on this presentation. If you have specific suggestions, anybody on the council can communicate with staff through our city manager, and we will take all of your comments into consideration as we try to put the final document together to present to you on August 6th. So we don't want to work in a vacuum. Any suggestions that you all have as you go back and review this presentation, if you would communicate through our city manager, staff would appreciate it and take into full consideration any comment you have relative to refining this for August 6th.
And just-
I certainly hear the communication here, so, yes.
Just for tonight, I found this on the Metropolitan Area Community Planning's agenda, if you want to pull it up to follow along, just for tonight.
The R4 and R4A infill residential development is an opportunity right now to do a planned unit development that involves manufactured homes. You're limited to areas that include R3 and R6. This will allow an opportunity to do a planned unit development involving manufactured homes in R4 and R4A. It can be individual lots or it can be groups of lots. You could do a half a block. This vehicle allows you to be as creative as you want because it has to go through a two-step process. It has to go to the Planning Commission for approval and then on to the City Council. So these would not necessarily be limited to those that meet the residential manufacturer standard. In the infill area, you could propose a traditional single-family, single-wide manufactured home in this PUD overlay. And if it fit the neighborhood, it could be approved. You can be creative in this vehicle. You could do a half a block and do multiple single wides, or you could do what we have classified as the residential that have the architectural features that fit into the neighborhood, and you could do a single lot or you could do multiple lots. I've seen some areas in redevelopment using the single wides, and they might do a half a block and they angle them on the property rather than where you're driving down the street and all you see is the back end of a manufactured home. They do them lay them out at an angle in a creative way. So you can be creative and present different proposals because it goes through the Planning Commission and the City Council for approval. This slide just shows the existing ordinance and the limitations of where you can put a manufactured home. And then depending on which of the options, Southern Heights overlay, Webster Park area overlay, or the PUD infill, we will have to amend that ordinance to add those as areas where manufactured homes, depending on which part of the proposal you adopt. This slide at this point is not that important, so I'll skip over it for this preliminary presentation. So next steps, at our meeting last night at the MAPC, they recommended adopting the following ordinances, the 5 that we talked about, with the caveat they've asked staff to finalize the proposed list of building design elements to be included in the residential manufactured home. And so they've assigned that task to us, but they recommended adopting to move it forward to the City Council so we can move the package of proposals forward. And then on August 6th, a public hearing before the mayor and Board of Commissioners. And then, as we talk, we want to consider, based on city manager's recommendation, holding a public meeting or a town hall meeting, whatever terminology you want to use, in the Southern Heights neighborhood prior to adopting the Southern Heights overlay district to get their input. Maybe they do want it to be easier and simpler where it's a permitted use rather than go through use by review. So that will be important to have that meeting. Even if we don't have it before August 6th, do it before we adopt that overlay district. Finally, some future studies we're seeing more and more use of shipping containers, both as retail for food vendors and clothes sales. We're seeing residential shipping containers more and more in our state. We want to study that and see where we need to amend our ordinance to catch up with the use of shipping containers so that we're comfortable that when shipping containers are used, whether it's for retail or residential, they're being done in a way that is orderly and conducive to our community. We want to look at ADUs. A lot of people refer to these as granny flats, accessory dwelling units where you have a small second dwelling unit in the backyard or on the property with the primary. There's also such a thing as accessory commercial units, and we will look at that. Parking guidelines, we want to study that. City of Norman and some other, they've done away with the parking guidelines altogether. So when you do a site plan, you're not required to have a minimum number of parking like in our current ordinance. We're not suggesting that we go from where we are to no regulation. I don't think we're ready for that. But one, some of our categories are not consistent with the type of developments we're seeing today, so we may need to add a few more categories, and we probably need to adjust it some. I guess the analogy I use is we don't need a parking lot built for a retail store to handle the traffic on the day after Thanksgiving when everybody's out shopping. Something in between. And then finally, as we have time, our zoning ordinance, Title 11, has not been updated for many, many years, and I think it's time for us to take a look at that and update terminology, the way we handle things to be consistent with best practices in planning by today's standards. With that, that's the end of my presentation, but I would be glad to entertain additional questions, and I appreciate the questions and comments that you've had already, and staff looks forward to any additional comments that you pass through the city manager to staff.
Let's go ahead and just get some comments now.
That's
Sure,
right.
there's some questions. Let's go ahead and see what we got.
Yes, sir.
Because again, I want to make clear, we may not be ready or comfortable to bring some of these things. Some things we might. So we'll follow the lead of Commissioners Saragusa and Norwood on tell us when we can set up, when's a good time. Love to have the Southern Heights meeting. I don't know if we might want to have one in Webster Park. David, can you come up to the podium and just tell us again how many vacant lots there are? I don't know if there's any people in. Of course there's people in Webster Park. So we might want to have, I don't know how they feel about this, but you can come up and tell us how you feel about it.
Well, I don't know how they feel about it either. The commissioners would know a lot better than I would. I just own a lot of property over there. About 12 months, 14 months ago, I went to the assessor's office and I asked the assessor if there was any way that she could go through the map of everything over in the Webster Park area. I did it a little bit differently. I took it from basically Chestnut to 412 and from 30th to 16th Street and asked her to go through that area. she had a young lady she had just hired that was training on the MAPS program to be able to do the maps. So she assigned that to her, and it took her about 30 days to get it all done. But the parameters were that each area had to be at least 50 feet wide, which would be 2 contiguous lots under the way that those are platted, and had to be at least 110 feet in depth. And there were about 118 lots in that area that met that parameter.
Vacant lot.
Vacant lots with nothing on them. Yeah.
Yep.
So with that, I started talking to Scott, started talking to Scott. And as I said last night, I've gone through 3 city planners, and I'm just so glad that Leroy has stuck around and made this happen. But there is a tremendous amount of property over there. And right now, it's not generating any revenue for the city. How successful this is going to be, I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I only own property over there. I've known that, in today, I'm a developer, home builder. If I went out right now and tried to build a 1,300 square foot sticks and bricks house, it's going to be between $225,000 and $240,000. That's not workforce housing. And that's what really and truly this area is probably, at least the Webster Park area, is probably designed for, or would be most accommodating. And that's basically for people that make $90,000 a year. Between $70,000 and $90,000 is workforce housing income as it's defined. So you're looking at people that on the low side are going to be looking for something in the neck of the woods of 80 to 90,000, which in many cases this program will not address. And then on the high side, they're going to be looking at 140 to 160,000, which this program will address. So I think it's a heck of a deal. I think the city's moved a long way forward. I want to comment or put some accolades on Leroy and on Scott Guerin, who've done a tremendous amount of work on getting it this far. Like I said, Scott and I have been working on this for about 2 years. So any other questions, I'd be happy to reply.
Do you want to have a meeting, or do you already know what the?
We'll try, we'll get.
I have some questions just in general about the presentation. One of the things on the infill, the PUD area, you said it goes through the Planning Commission and then the City Council. Does the resident, if there's a home that has, let's say this home is a $500,000 home, and we're going to allow a manufactured home to come in beside that, does the resident of the $500,000 home have a process of protesting that? Or does the HOA cover that, if there's an HOA in place?
If there is a homeowners association, we don't enforce the covenants of a homeowners association. In a subdivision, if they have covenants that would not allow a manufactured home, we don't enforce it. They would enforce those through action in district court, the homeowners association. Cities don't enforce private covenants. But if going through the plan unit development, there would be opportunities for neighbors in that area and anybody in the community to have an opportunity to speak up and present their input. And they would have 2 opportunities to do that. One at the Planning Commission when it's presented to the Planning Commission, and number 2 at the City Council. And based on the limited time I've been here, I believe our Planning Commission and our City Council both are very receptive to entertaining feedback from the community, and I think that their voices would be heard if they had concerns.
And it's posted. If it's in their neighborhood, they'll see the sign.
Yeah.
There's a sign
At
with
the
like the
entrance
dates.
to the neighborhood? It would be posted at the entrance.
Well, I think
Yes.
I don't know if we posted at the entrance of the neighborhood, but we posted on the piece of property involved,
Okay.
and it says when the dates of the times it will be considered.
Okay. Well, just an example, the pickleball court, the people that lived on the back side of that didn't come down that street, so they didn't know about it until somebody informed them. So,
Okay.
you know, we need to make
Yeah,
sure that,
okay.
that there's a way that everybody gets to see that, not just somebody that drives by that piece of property.
You know, another great thing to know about this PUD process, part of it, is that it is for the R4 and R4A zone property, which are duplex zone properties.
Okay.
It is not available in R1 or R2 single family to come in and put a manufactured house in those zonings. It's really only proposed for the ones that are duplexes.
Okay,
We
awesome.
we
Good to
felt
know.
like that made a better fit.
Sure.
Already.
And I agree with that. Another thing, requiring sidewalks, I know this is one of the things that's been beat to death in our city, the sidewalks to nowhere. If we're talking about affordable housing or economic housing, and we're requiring a sidewalk to be put in, I feel like there needs to be an incentive from the city, if that's affordable at all. When they're putting their house in there, we offer to pay for 50% of the sidewalk if they put that in. It's an option to them. I have a really hard time forcing people to put a sidewalk on their property. But I know sidewalks are wonderful to have. I actually witnessed today, just a couple of hours ago, a woman with a walker coming out of the La Mesa neighborhood and walking along the street, and people having to go around her to get to Harbor Freight or wherever she might have been going. That's scary to me. So yes, I think there's an importance for sidewalks, but I feel like that responsibility falls on the city.
I think Leroy's getting ready to tell you, those were just ideas that came from other cities. We weren't proposing sidewalks. Believe me, I've been here through all those revisions. We have a good sidewalk ordinance in place, and I think we would follow that, in my opinion. So, but Leroy, go ahead.
And that's what I was going to
Personally, it shocked
reinforce.
me that it even came up after all the sidewalk stuff that we went through.
Well, I probably wasn't here.
You weren't.
But those were just samples of ordinances from other communities. We need to tailor that to our community.
Sure.
And as the city manager indicated, if we've already got a sidewalk program and ordinance in place, there wouldn't be any reason to incorporate it in here. You also see in some of these, it says you have to get a building permit. Well, we already got that covered. You got to get a building permit to build anything. So it would make sense for us to put in these ordinance, you got to get a building permit because it's covered other places. So we don't want to duplicate, because anytime you duplicate, you end up, it doesn't get worded exactly the same. Just like there's places in our ordinances, we have definitions, 2 different places, and they're not worded exactly the same. So we don't want to duplicate. If we already got it covered somewhere in our ordinance, we'll use that ordinance rather than add another layer to it. So again, that was just reflecting what other communities have done. And every community situation is different than ours. If I was in Guthrie and I was proposing this, it would have a little bit different appearance. And so you have to tailor it to the needs and the orderly growth of the community that you're in. And that's why you all are good guides for us on doing that.
All right, I have one last one. I want to make sure I understand this right. A mobile home, the definition of that is the one that's built before 1974.
Correct. It does
So
not
anything-
meet the HUD code.
So anything after 74 would be considered a manufactured home?
Correct.
Okay,
If it met the HUD code, which it should if it was built after 74.
okay. So
There may be a little gap there because they adopted in 74, and then there was a couple of years period when they got into enforcing it. So between 74 and 76, there still may have been some built that did meet the HUD code, but
So we're
that
not
way.
trying to phase out the mobile home parks.
We're not trying to phase them out, but we want quality. And if you look at a mobile home, you're talking about something that was built in the 70s that has a lot of age to it, probably been moved around quite a bit. You don't want those being moved into the community. We're using manufactured homes could go in those, and they wouldn't have to have the residential features that we're talking about adding to manufactured homes to go into a traditional neighborhood. They would just be simply manufactured homes that could be single wide, what we traditionally call single wide or double wides, all those ranges. So they won't have the same requirements as the ones we're proposing to go into residential neighborhoods.
Okay, this is all new stuff to me, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand everything.
Your questions are all good
Yeah, I
questions.
think that's good. Maybe for the future presentation, when we send stuff out and come back, maybe we should show a map of where manufactured homes or mobile homes, whatever we call them, are still, you can put them in R3 and R6. We could show a map of all those areas. Some of you are familiar with where the
And
trailer
I
home
guess
places are.
I would say, I understand, the manufactured companies and their idea about you have to have a brand-new one, it can't be more than 2 years old. Obviously, I understand why they're saying that, because they want to sell their own product. So perhaps the 2 years, I'm just thinking, in 6 and 3, maybe we're a little more, we've let anything in there for all these years. Maybe saying it's got to be a manufactured home in 2 years, that's brand new, is maybe being a little strict.
Can I clarify? When we talk about being 2 years old or less, we're talking about the residential manufactured homes that are going in the 2 overlay districts in a traditional neighborhood.
Okay.
We're not talking about adding that requirement to manufactured homes in R6, R3, or even in the PUD overlay district.
Okay. I got confused, and I've actually read everything. It is a confusing, large thing. I just was a little concerned, a 3-year-old manufactured house.
Again, that would be
Okay.
limited to the 2 overlay.
Okay.
Thank you for clarifying, because I am learning all this stuff as I go, and I love the concept, I love what we're doing, and I think it's very necessary. So thank you.
I think that Cheryl's on point. I mean, you've thrown out a lot of information. You've hit us with a fire hose on this, and it's difficult to differentiate what you really think we should do and what Ardmore does or some other community does, because you've hit a lot of that. And you haven't summarized that for us in any kind of a handout. So we're sitting here trying to take notes as quick as you're talking, and there's not many notes here because you were talking really fast. So I think that you need to come back to us with more information in hard copy form. I'm not looking for ordinances to read. I want to know, this is the process, this is what you recommend, and break it down to us where stupid guys like me can understand it.
Well, I might fit that category too. What we plan to do, based on any input from the city council members that you pass on to our city manager, and internally, community development, assistant city manager, we will refine that. So when we come back to you, there won't be a whole range of options. Here's what Ardmore does, here's what Oklahoma City. We will be making a specific recommendation. Here's what we think it should be.
Okay.
And so you won't, all of the fodder will be gone, and we'll be down to the meat and potatoes.
Don't assume we remember all these definitions.
I understand.
Well, the
Make sure.
definitions are probably the primary thing that, it is a lot. And as I hear it, again, we're not trying to ram all this stuff home. We're just trying to provide options. So we will definitely try to clarify and make sure the information gets out. But I think what what I will recommend the commission consider doing at least on August 6th is updating the definitions. And so we'll clearly talk about that, show an ordinance for that. And then I think there's several other options. You know, we're going to have some hearings on some of those options, and then we can just kind of see how it goes, because it is a lot. So we will keep marching ahead. So see, that's why it takes 2 years, David. But we'll get there. Hang in there with us.
I appreciate all the input, and it will be fully considered.
Thanks, Leroy. Appreciate it. If there's nothing else, we're going to adjourn and pick back up here in for our regular meeting at 6:30.